So the first step in this project is taking my close-up of the print. The print that I chose is the story of, and hopefully I'm saying this right, Nippon Daimon and the Cat. This is a print by Utagawa Kuniyoshi, made in 1835. So I've got my close-up of the print. I've got my wood block that's going to be transferred on. I'm going to start by taking some tracing paper and I'm going to tape it down just so it doesn't move on me. And I'm just gonna start by sort of tracing out probably a simplified version of the actual piece. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start at the top left and sort of work my way across the print. The reason that I do that is I don't want my hand to accidentally get onto the lead because I'm going to need that to transfer. Anytime I have trouble seeing something too, I also just look up, pull it up there, and just make sure I'm sort of hitting, like that's a hard shade to look at. Make sure I'm getting it right. And I do leave out a couple things here and there, like some of the shading, so I'm breaking this down into a contour line drawing. All right, now I'm going to be speeding this up. I think they would do it. It'd just be a matter of when and how much. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now that we have the tracing, we're going to be transferring it onto the wood. So you're just going to flip the paper, and this is just called trace and transfer. So I'm applying pressure to the other side, and what that's going to do is it's going to force the lead out onto the wood. It technically doesn't have to be done with a pencil, so I could do the same thing with my finger and it would transfer as well, but I do like to do the pencil so I know exactly where I've already put pressure. So when I teach this to people, I say, just use the pencil, it's a lot easier to figure it out. But it really is about the pressure. It doesn't really have anything to do with the marks that you're making. So we're going to pressure this onto the other side. And I'm going to repeat this and do this twice. So I'm going to be doing a two-color block print. So I need two different blocks, or in this case, the front and the back, since this is thick enough to handle carving on both sides. So I'm going to repeat this exact same thing so that both sides have the exact same print. Before I pull this off completely, I'm just going to peek, make sure everything's on there. And if I missed anything, fix it up. And then I will have my print on here. So next I'm going to be taking the Sharpie and going through and going over these pencil lines. So this will fade a little bit, which is fine. Because we want it to thicken up. It's actually a lot easier to print if it is a little thicker. So I'm not too concerned with that part. And just the nature of the woods, yeah, it spreads out a little bit. So I'm going to do this to the entire print. And then we'll move on to the next step together. Okay, so now that we've got our print with the Sharpie, so it's thickened up a little, it's a lot easier to figure out where we're carving. We're gonna get out our carving tools. So this is a basic carving set that you can buy pretty much anywhere art supplies are, or on Amazon or Dick Blick, any of those type of websites. and it comes with a sharpening knife and a various range of blades. So some of the blades, just to point out, so we got a couple different types. This type is called a U-gouge. So you can see the little U shape. So this is used for scooping out and pushing forward. Probably one of my favorite ones to use. Another type of blade you'll typically find, and these come in all different sizes. You can see this is also a U blade. This is just a larger size one. You'll find a chisel. So the chisels come in a flat edge like this. So use this to go across the edge, push forward. You'll probably find also a skew chisel. These are used for angling. So same idea, but you're able to angle. And then you'll also find a V. So you'll find a V tool as well. Those are used for harsh outlining. So the two I usually teeter between are the U-gouge and the V-shape tool. And then occasionally I'll use the regular chisel to sort of chip out areas that I know sort of done with. All the other ones in this set are just, you know, various sizes of what I just showed you. And some of them are actually better for like wood carving versus the printmaking that we're doing here. So you're gonna be taking the V tool. This is good for outlining. Basically, you're just pressing it forward. You start pulling at some of this wood. Obviously, it takes quite a bit of pressure. Start by pulling at it. And just to show you the difference here, if I was doing the U shape, so this gets rid of the surface area. And we don't need to get like tons of the layers of wood out. We're just trying to get rid of the top layer. So you're gonna start by going across. Some people like to hold this with their thumb on the outside like this on the top, and then put it into the palm. And then they can use their whole body and sort of get above it to go. Some people also swivel back and forth to start to chip some up. They're just going across the surface and starting to pull some of this out. So I'm gonna start doing this sort of off camera. It's a lot easier when you get above it, but because the camera's here, I don't wanna overshadow what I'm doing. So I usually get above and lean into it so I can really go down and then come back up. So I'll get rid of a little bit and then I'll show you sort of where we're at. So as you can see, I've got quite a bit done on the background here. As you do this, you may end up losing some bits here and there. That's sort of the nature of the beast working with wood grain. As you get better at this, and depending on how much time you're willing to devote to making sure it's precision, those start to clear up and get better. But as you can see, I lost quite a bit throughout here. Which is unfortunate, but that's also part of the idea of making something that's handmade and has that, you know, element of human error. So it doesn't really bother me so much. I just wanted to do a quick close-up of some of the carving. So I have one of my tools here that what's been working out good for me is sort of starting with an outline using this first. So I'm going through and picking the area and sort of giving myself a cut. What that's been helping me do is sort of outline where I want the wood grain to break. And it does help avoid some of the mistakes where it ends up eating through more than it's supposed to. So I'm just taking, notice I'm always cutting the same direction with my blade at a 45-degree angle. And I'm pulling it towards the base here, giving myself a little breathing room. I'm going through and doing this to every part of that inner side. And then I'm taking, this is a V tool as well. This is just a handheld one. I use these for my linoleum printing. So this shape is a little easier to hold, and also has some extra blades in here with different sizes. So this is also really useful in the carving. And then I'm gonna start inside the trench here. I'm sort of just working back and forth, so doing this also helps cut without slipping. So a lot of times if you just go straight through, you end up putting behind so much pressure trying to make it perfect that it can slide on you. So I like to go back and forth, sort of slow myself down. So what you saw just happened there because I had made that previous cut with the knife, it ended up breaking right on the line. So normally that would have just broken right through. So this is gonna leave a little trench through here, and then digging that part out is gonna become a lot easier. I can just sort of go at it, or I can switch over to one of my flat knife tools. And you don't have to dig out tons because we are going to make this so it's just going to print on the top layer. So that went right to the other line, and as you just saw, went right through. Even though I'd made the cut, it still ate through a little bit. So that does happen. You saw how I just sort of propped it up and did that. So if you want to avoid those little errors, you just have to really slow down and go through and make every single cut count. But I'm sort of taking the lazier, fast approach out of this so that I can get this thing printed up in a timely fashion for this video. It also helps if you always start in the trench, so in that little tiny line there, so that you're not eating into those really tiny parts. So you'll see me rotate around, starting in that triangle and working my way up along the line and getting through. So I'm going to continue this on, finish up this last little area here, and then we will move on to the printing portion of this. Okay, we're now moving on to the printing portion of the video. I've got some supplies here. So I have printing paper. I've also got the sheet of mulberry paper that's got some other color added to it. I've got my original print. I've got my printing ink. This is just a speedball block printing ink. This one's washable, so I use this one in the classroom. But they make many different types of block printing ink, so you're not necessarily tied to this one. I've got a Baron. This is used to apply pressure. You can also just do this with your hand, but this one gives a more even pressure. I've got my brayer. So this is my roller. And then I have a sheet of glass. This is just a cutting board that I use here in the classroom. As you can see, they get used a lot, not necessarily clean. So the first thing we're gonna do is roll out the ink. So we're going to put about the size of a quarter and just start rolling it out. So we're actually listening for a noise, and we want a satin finish on it. So once it sounds pretty consistent, it's got that satin coat to it, then we're going to start applying it to the block. And this is our test print, so we have not done a print yet, and it's going to pick up some of the stuff on the side. And that happens because we don't know if we went deep enough on most of it. The students one will have quite a bit more of those than I do. I also know not to let this go onto the edge. You notice I always go back and forth. The wood does have an absorption rate that linoleum and the plastics don't. So it takes a little bit more ink to do the wood prints than it does if you're doing linoleum or a plastic. I'm going to take my paper, press it down. I'm not really worried about getting this perfectly centered because I know I'm going to mat these anyways. But we can go into the registration part of this in a different video where you're lining it up perfectly each time. This is just one print, so the lineup isn't super important, as it would be if I'm doing two different colors. You can see it start to shine through. I'm going to pull it up. You can see some of that grainy texture showing through. So this is what I meant by the absorption rate. So that ink already absorbed right into that wood before we even had a chance to get the print down. So for the next one, we're gonna apply a little bit more. And then this one we're gonna do on our mulberry paper. So some of that red shows through. And sometimes you can also get more fibrous paper and you can wet it or dampen it and then dry it off a little bit before you do a print, and it's actually going to soak more ink out of the print. So a lot of printing papers are designed to do that. If you use a rice paper or mulberry paper, these printing papers, they're pretty good about picking up most of the ink as long as you apply some pressure to it. All right, let's see how this one came out. Yeah, this one picked up a little more ink. So you can see some of that background play with the actual object of the print. So that's really all there is to it. If I were doing a double print, so I had started doing the back here, if I'd done one color, then I would have to get into the color first. So let's say I'm doing a blue robe, having this set out with blue, and then the registration, you have to get this lined up and basically take the same exact one and put it down again, which is how this used to be done with the Ukiyo-e prints with multiple colors. So this is really just a basic introductory on how to use the woodblock print. So I hope you enjoyed, and best of luck.